Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present Chayim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and I have a very, very special edition of Chayim to share with you tonight and today. On Tuesday, October 15th, there's going to be a major event in the American Jewish community. If you watch Shalom TV often, you will well know about the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. It is the umbrella organization that really represents all of us, American Jewry, and many of the major organizations throughout America. 51 member organizations are under the umbrella of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, and there are also observer groups as well. And the Conference of Presidents has been speaking for American Jews, especially on issues pertaining to the State of Israel and Jewish communities threatened throughout the world. They have been speaking for us to the White House, to Congress, to the media, and to other Jewish communities across the world. They've been speaking for us for 50 years. The Conference of Presidents is about to celebrate its 50th anniversary. I get chills telling you. 50th anniversary on October 15th of 2013. And they're doing it with an wonderful gala evening. We'll be showing you that evening on Shalom TV. And one of the aspects that is being celebrated is the gentleman who has been the executive vice chairman for the Conference of Presidents since 1986. There are many extraordinary people on the American Jewish scene today who are doing wonderful things, creative things, things to represent the State of Israel and the Jewish people. None has done more than the executive vice chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, who will also be celebrated on October 15th. And I have the pleasure of sitting with him right now. I have the pleasure of sitting with this man since 1979 and beyond, Malcolm Hoenlein. And many of you know Malcolm. You've seen him countless of times on Shalom TV. And if you are in any way involved in the Jewish world, there does not seem to be a major issue or a major event that Malcolm does not represent the best of American Jewry at both occasions and issues that confront American and world Jewry. And personally for me, and remember I've been doing L'chaim since 1979, and even then Malcolm was critically involved in Jewish life, and you should know his Jewish service did not start with the Conference of Presidents. He was instrumental in both shaping and then leading organizations that dealt with the fight to save Soviet Jewry and the Jewish Community Relations Council here in New York. And in essence, when Yehuda Hellman, who for a long time was the executive vice chairman of the Conference of Presidents, when he passed away, Malcolm was grabbed. And it was the smartest thing American Jewry ever did. And we've been friends for a long time, and you've been wonderful to me, and you've supported everything I've done. But I want you to understand that for me, to be able to say Mazal Tov to you as we get ready for Tuesday's event is one of the big thrills. And you went out of your way to sit with us to talk about, I want to talk about you a little bit, and I want to talk about what you see the Conference of Presidents really doing. But I thank you first for sitting with me, and for all the things you've done for me, but also for a half a lifetime of service. I mean half a lifetime, you got a half a lifetime still left to go. But what you have done
Could you put
for
that
Jewish,
in writing?
what you've done for Jewish life is extraordinary. And I know everybody, I am expressing what everybody's going to say to you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all you've done and the care and the integrity you bring to the job. And I'm going to say one more thing, then we'll let Malcolm talk. Again, there are wonderful people who we get to bring you on Shalom TV. You get to meet, you get to hear what they have to say. But there is an exceptional degree of commitment, dedication. Malcolm spends more than 24 hours a day working on Jewish life. And that's what people really have to understand. And I think people appreciate, anyone who knows you appreciates the way in which your soul is all about the good of the Jewish people, wherever they are, your love for the Jewish people, your love for the state of Israel, and your intense desire to make sure all of us have as beautiful and as healthy and as secure Jewish life we can. And part of it is within this extraordinary experiment called the United States of America. But your concern for world Jewry has been embracing and uplifting, and there cannot be enough said about what you've done, and I thank you very much for it.
Thank you. Please go on.
I'm happy to. I want to talk a little bit about you.
As you know, I could say much of that about you too,
No,
about our
no.
relationship over all of these years, which I greatly appreciate, and certainly in this new phase with Shalom TV, which, as you know, I think is a great service
Yes.
to the community. But I very much appreciate it, and coming from you, it means a lot to me
Thank
personally and professionally, and the support that was shown for this event is really moving for many reasons.
But we talk about that for a moment. Incidentally, off camera we talked for a moment about how the average person, whether they're going to be there or whether they're going to watch it on Shalom TV or they read about it in the newspaper, no one has any idea how much extraordinary work, how much detail, how many things are always in flux. This has been this tribute to the Conference of Presidents and to you on Tuesday night has been exhausting, has it not?
It is exhausting, and it has been for me and we have a very small staff. We haven't done a dinner in 20 years. We do an annual reception, which is much smaller. But many people felt it was really necessary sometimes just to come together and celebrate. When God created the earth, as we read recently in the portion of the week in the synagogue, he says, Vayar ki tov, after the days of creation. He said, and he saw that it was good. So did God have to compliment himself? I mean, he's the height of perfection. What did he have to say? Hey, I did a good job. The answer is that it was meant for us. That there are times when after you've done something, you have to step back. We all know the problems, but to step back and say, we've done well. And if you look at the history of these 50 years, what the conference has done, its role and the role of the American Jewish community, we've really done well. We've accomplished amazing things. We never take the time to sit back and assess because we're always on to the next thing. And in this experience for this dinner, there were many remarkable things that happened.
Like what?
Well, when we first made the decision, the Friends of the IDF, Jerry Gershon, called me up and said he wanted to talk to me, and then I saw him at a dinner that night. And he called me over and he said, we're handling it. You don't have the experience. I have a staff, the conference staff, which nobody would believe if they would see it, is 7 inclusive of clerical and everything else. They work day and night as it is. And throughout this period, we've been doing all our regular programming and hosting leaders, and we had the UN General Assembly with many foreign ministers and heads of state. And the UJ Federation of New York said, we'll help you. They knew, and I tell you honestly, we could not have pulled this off without them, and without remarkable people who came in, staff people who worked for us many years ago, who came back and have been helping us, Heather Jacobson, Malki Tannenbaum, others who just fill in voids, and from having to do a journal and doing videos and doing all the other things that are necessary for a dinner, different components, that people have 60, 70 people working on it. If it weren't for all the wonderful people who volunteered, the people who came forward with contributions. I mean, we don't have a fundraising department. I don't have any development staff.
And we should say you are a nonprofit.
And this is the Conference President's Fund. It's a 501c3. The donations are, and literally 2 weeks before the event, we were sold out. So in many ways, this has been a very exhilarating experience because of the support, the friendship, the public officials, the heads of state, scores of ambassadors coming to this event. I mean, just everybody wanting to be part of it. And they don't know a single speaker. They don't know anything.
That's right. No one knows the program yet.
Nobody has an idea.
But doesn't it say something to you about how people feel about the conference and you?
So it's a message to Jewish leadership. Don't believe it's not appreciated. don't believe it doesn't make a difference in people's lives. And to Jewish professionals and potential Jewish professionals, this is an exciting field. It's difficult at times, it can be very burdensome, but there's a community out there that really does care. And I look at my grandchildren and I know why I spend every minute at it. I would rather spend the time with them, and I try to spend some time with them. But many of them, have gotten really into the issues and things and follow it and read the Daily Alert and certainly listen to the radio show. But I know my responsibility, and it's to my grandparents who died in Auschwitz and other camps, and to my grandchildren. And when you have that, it puts in perspective.
That's love. I'm glad you understand, and I think you're right. Many Jewish leaders are always worried that their work is unappreciated, and it is appreciated more than they know. I decided I want to talk first about the conference, then we'll get to you. You have been the executive vice chairman. You've led this conference for more than half of its existence. More than 25 years you have been in this role. As you look at these last 6 years that you've been here, how has the conference changed? Is there a difference now, or do you feel that it has been it has played one consistent role? As Jewish life has evolved, has the conference evolved as well?
I would say both are true. There is a consistency, and that the wisdom in the way that conference was structured at the beginning, which may have been strange, it is not the normal structure that you have two people, the chairman and the executive vice chairman, and the board is the member organizations. And it was purposely done as a loose structure to be flexible over time, to be able to adjust. We have tried to regularize it more. We introduced principles and guidelines that were adopted by the full conference. We've tried to, have some semblance of a normal organization. But frankly, it's the only umbrella that has survived as we have, intact, when many others have disappeared and or diminished. And I would say we're stronger in many respects than ever. We have more than 50 organizations that still come together. We have many applications for membership in the conference. People value membership in the conference. People want to be the chairman, even though it means devoting 2 years of your life, a good part of your life, to this. So that part is consistent. On the other hand, we also are a creation of our member organizations, and there we have seen changes. Some organizations become more important, some have been less important, their membership have changed. The community evolves, and some of the issues, I think, as well. I think our agenda today is more complex than it ever was. Because
in what sense?
In the sense that because of globalization, everything is interrelated. You also have to have a degree of expertise that you perhaps didn't, because it's not just a question of supporting the state of Israel. You have to make the case for Israel today. Yes. You have to be able to answer things. You have to deal whether it's with Egypt's revolution and Syria's internal civil war, Iran, and then what is the interrelationship between them and with Israel?
Okay. I gave a sort of summary idea of what the conference is, but I imagine there are many viewers right now who don't understand, what do you really do? Explain what the conference does. And when you're not doing all of the work relating to the Jewish world, what is the conference involved in that you're helping to lead?
Okay, so when people ask, but what do you really do? Learning from a friend, I say I'm a notary public, and they say, oh, that makes sense. This is a full-time engagement. I mean, it's a commitment of life when you take on, I believe it has to be, when you take on a responsibility like this. Because it can come this morning from a call from the president of a major university, and before that from a major Christian leader in America, telling me about a university that wants to establish a remarkable facility in Israel and has been stymied, and can we help bridge the gap and explain to them some of the differences. Then it can be a case of an individual who is, or a community that is in danger, that doesn't want publicity, where we may work with the Joint, or we may work with Hayas and other groups to address their particular or collective issues. Again, things that are done with great sensitivity. And part of the reason why I believe that government officials, presidents over the years, leaders of Congress, and foreign leaders especially, know they deal with us in confidence, that we don't leak, that we don't go to the media with it, because I'm not interested in the headlines. I'm interested in the results. And because we're an umbrella organization, we're not competing with our members. We try to utilize all of these tremendous resources, and we do have within the major organizations amazing people and remarkable resources of information that sometimes government doesn't have or doesn't see it from the same perspective. So that when we make a case, it's the credibility of our arguments, it's the legitimacy of the case we make. It is tested over time. If they find you wanting, they will not have that relationship. If they find that these guys are really smart, they know what they're talking about, they have information that's useful, that we're not just pushing a cause, we're making the case for why this is important for America, why all of the issues, why sanctions have been so significant. And we've been arguing this case for almost 20 years, long before anybody wanted to talk to us about it. The same thing with Islamist fundamentalism in the late 80s. And over time, people begin to see these guys know what they're talking about, and they have something to offer. And when you meet with a foreign leader, more times than not, when they're smart, the first part of the meeting is that they're testing you. I want to see, what does this guy know? Is he serious? And the other thing with that is that we've had the opportunity to meet with foreign leaders in countries that don't have relations with Israel, that very, complex situations, let's say. But again, it arises out of the image of the conference, their experience with it, or the reputation that they've heard from others. So to go back, these are not things that the conference did 50 years ago. The conference was operating on a very fundamental basis with critical issues. They did some things we don't do today. They had a committee on Black-Jewish relations or other things that today would not be seen as part of the conference mandate. We deal with national and international issues. We don't deal with the domestic agenda. It is a defined limitation, but there's so much now today in that box. It's not just Israel, I think we could say, but everything relates to Israel, because everything relates also to our security and America's national interest and the strength of this special U.S.-Israel relationship. So we are concerned today with what happens in Europe, and we work with our counterparts in the Jewish communities in Europe. We visit there, and it's important because they see us as a source of reinforcement, of strength, of giving them more confidence in their ability to articulate their case and to argue their case. So when we go with them to see their foreign leaders, or when they're here in the UGA, the UN General Assembly, we consult with them, and we are in fact giving them a voice too, to say that this American Jewish community, which is seen as all powerful and all the rest that sometimes our enemies ascribe to us, and sometimes our friends, is a real asset. Some of the organizations, as I said, have evolved during this period, and the membership has changed a little bit. We brought in some, we've actually dropped some. We don't do it publicly, we're not looking to embarrass them. But, with time you have to step back. And the model for me is that an eagle at age 35, its beak grows over its mouth, its claws become so big that they can't grab anything. It goes off and it breaks its beak, and it claws off its claws and regrows them, and then starts life anew. And I think for Jewish life, we have to do the same. There are times when we have to step back and say, we have to look at the issues, we have to continue in meaning responsibility, but how do we do it? And so we started the Strategic Communication Center to get into the 21st century media, to use the new media and the tools that offers us. We have the Lawfare Project, we have SCAN to deal with community security issues, which perhaps were not as big a concern in the past, and we didn't have this vast network of institutions that have to be protected and the threats from abroad that are coming here. So there are a whole array, and then America's Voices, which is doing such amazing work, things that were not thinkable, of movie stars, television stars going 3-4 times a year, delegations to Israel. I mean, it's breaking. We just had a group come back yesterday. It's unbelievable. They can get 1,000 articles on a single trip. And today a group of top Hispanic media personalities and actors went to Israel. So I think we have to try and reinvent ourselves, sticking to the core principles, not expanding the structure. That's why I don't expand this staff. I believe lean is mean. That's how you get things done. I think the accountability to the community is essential. And they know that every dollar we get gets used well.
As you think back give me two or three of what you feel were the greatest accomplishments or greatest moments under your leadership of the Conference of Presidents.
There were so many, some of which I can't talk about yet. I certainly think the freeing of the Iran 13, knowing that 3 were marked for death and 10 for long prison terms. But because of the campaign which we were privileged to coordinate around the world, got 65 countries involved, including Muslim and Arab countries and many others, that for the first time we were able to save Jews who otherwise would have met a terrible
Lovely.
fate.
That's one.
The march in Washington,
Absolutely.
where 200,000 people in less than a week, it was the maximum demonstration of achdus, of the community coming together. Everybody pitched in, everybody worked on it. It was a remarkable event.
What do you think the consequence of it was?
First of all, in bolstering the people of Israel at a time when they were under siege with terrorism. 2, it mobilized every source of the American society, whether it was union leaders, head of the AFL-CIO, black leaders, Hispanic leaders, the president sent a representative, the leaders of Congress were there. It showed that the American people were with Israel. And the people of Israel needed to hear it. I think people here needed to hear it.
And this was on the steps of the Capitol building.
On the steps of the Capitol, we got special permission, and people told us that the whole turnpike was a convoy, that black churches in the Bronx organized buses. And we didn't even know, they just showed up. And that was, I would say,
extraordinary
certainly
accomplishment.
A highlight
Yeah.
of what we did.
One more.
I would say the repeal of Jackson-Vanik,
Mm-hmm.
of the Zionism racism.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the sanctions legislation on Iran more recently was the first ones were really critical in terms of setting a pattern and getting things done. I can give you 100 examples of what I think where we really were able to make a difference, a lasting difference, and many things that we have yet to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. As you look at the American-Israeli relationship and the Conference of Presidents' role in that, what do you feel stands out?
Look, I think the very fact that the strength of the relationship has been enhanced, that there are a lot of people who try to undermine it. There are a lot of people who write about the diminution support. We have found that, in fact, the American people stand with Israel. You have to explain to them why. We've done this massive study, an in-depth study of the American people to understand what is it that motivates their attitudes towards Jews in Israel. How do you change it? And that we found that it's ignorance and indifference. It's not antipathy to Israel. The vast majority of the American people support Israel. So I think building this strong support in Congress, and I think presidents of the United States have been pro-Israel today. The military security relationship, when people always focus on negative, are stronger than ever. It's really, truly remarkable. Today, ships putting in Haifa, Eilat, other places, which has not happened. And I think that many people, for a long time, thought terrorism was Israel's problem. Today, everybody realizes, unfortunately, after 9/11, but in general, that they've come to see that Israel is an asset, that Israel, it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street where we help them. I think the Arab Spring has changed people's thinking on a lot of stuff, including leaders in the Arab world who now talk about Israel very differently than they did before. They'll condemn Israel, but they say to me, it's our only hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are, the globalization of economics and the globalization of politics changes things. That you have to take a broader view of the ramifications of each issue that you deal with. So when you deal with Iran, you're really dealing with South America, where they're very active, and Venezuela, Argentina, the activities of Hezbollah in the United States, and we are working even on what might seem esoteric, the issue of cigarette smuggling. It yields $1 billion a year to Hezbollah from America. And now we're working with FBI, we're working with the big tobacco companies, we're working with all sorts of security agencies to get this issue out front, to try and address it.
No one knows this, you know.
Well, we don't want people necessarily, it's not something public. We will go public because we want people to understand what the real danger is, that not only does New York State lose $300 million in taxes, but first of all, these cigarettes, as bad as cigarettes are, but these are even worse because they have all sorts of terrible filler. Second of all, it is feeding narco-terrorism, weapons purchases. It's feeding the whole Hezbollah operation. And this involves Mexico, it involves the Canadian government with which we're working, and I even went to Prime Minister Harper about it. And it involves Europe today. It's also now illegal drugs, prescription drugs, all sorts of things which are terribly dangerous because they're not real. It's in a small example, but it's one example when we worked about the prison systems and the infiltration by radical elements, or when we helped expose some other activities in the United States that, let alone the activities abroad, and the interrelationship of all of these things, which affects the security of Israel, which affects the security of the United States, security of everybody. So I think that we have to approach things differently. We have to have much more depth of understanding. You have to be able to perceive, you have to have a lot of side vision to be able to perceive some of the attendant issues and ramifications of the issues to be effective.
Okay. What about you in the White House? And I say you, the President's Conference. And how has the relationship between the President's Conference and the White House also evolved? And in essence, you have seen many administrations come and go, and you've had to relate to all of them. And one of the things, if you go on your website, there's a wonderful picture of the Conference of Presidents meeting, for example, with President Obama. Talk about what you feel the role is of the President's Conference with the American administration and the White House.
Well, this is one of the major purposes, one of the reasons the conference was created at John Foster Dulles, not a great friend, but then Secretary of State's insistence and others, to get our act together, essentially. But the primary responsibility is relating to the White House, to American leaders and to foreign leaders, to give them an address to be able to talk to the American community, and for the community to talk to the White House. It doesn't mean it's exclusive, it doesn't mean other people can't, but the fact is that when we have a meeting, they come to the conference usually to set it up, or at the meetings the conference chairman serves as the spokesman. Each president is different. They have their own governance style, they have their own attitudes and views. And it's not our job, it is our job to change, to respond to that, to be flexible, to be able to know how you deal with each one. But they want to see your integrity. They want to see what you stand for, that you know what you believe in. And I've had incredible experiences with presidents of the United States who often have told me really amazing things, very confidential things, or responded to situations quietly, sometimes against their own advisors, when we made the case for an action that had to be taken. Their governance styles can be master delegators or master aggregators. They can be people who micromanage or who only look at the broad picture and leave it for others. So in each administration, we have to identify who is it that matters and works, and how open are they to this kind of communication. And I find in most cases they are very open, including this administration. We meet with the president fairly regularly. We have very good communication with people in the White House and the administration, the State Department, as we do certainly with members of Congress.
I want you to speak about what you feel, where you feel the criticism of the conference or anything that's been done through this office is both justified and unjustified. And more important, I've told the audience, I know you very well, and I sometimes feel that the personal attacks on you, which on the one hand do not come often, but when they come, they tend to be mean. I want to know how you deal with that personally. You understand.
I do. That's a very fair question. So, but there are multiple questions in that.
Yes, take your time.
For one, you have to believe that what you're doing is the right thing. And I try to assess not what it means to me or not how do I look, but how do we accomplish the goal that we're responsible for. It's very important that people have a sense of trust and confidence that they believe you're competent. It's not a popularity contest. It's not a question of whether they like you. It's a question of whether they work with you and respect you, and hopefully from that get to appreciate what you are, what you stand for. And after almost 5 decades, there's very little that people don't know about me. Thank God, I would say that there are very few barbs, and usually it comes from people who have particular agendas. and the conference by its nature can't satisfy the extreme left or extreme right. That's the goal, is to try and build a consensus, to come to some commonality which everybody can live with. It doesn't mean that they won't satisfy, and if they criticize us, they're entitled to criticize if they don't like. But the truth is, if I wander off where the consensus is, believe me, everybody knows it. Every newspaper will have at me because of people being criticized. I often say that they ask me, how do you keep 50 presidents together? I tell them I give them a common enemy, me. But it is not the case. And I would say we have more comedy in the conference today than any time I remember. It will intensify some of the conflicts when we deal, if we have to go back to, let's say, a peace process and they're dealing with territorial concessions. But look, Iran is the unifying issue, the Arab Revolution, the security of Israel. These are all issues in which 95%, 99% agree. So, I don't feel the kind of internal tensions and criticisms that at times were levied. And everybody has a different style. My style was very different than you, the Hellmans, and people, I had to adjust, and they had to adjust to it. Does it hurt? Of course it hurts when you feel that you're doing so much and trying to help, and somebody can make the most ludicrous charge, but I mean absolutely baseless, no foundation in any truth. I mean, it's not. I remember an Israeli paper published something about me, something I said at a meeting. I said, number one, I wasn't in Israel. Number two, I wasn't in the meeting. Number three, I never said it. They said, did they spell your name right? I said, yes. He said, so what do you care? The answer is I do care, because I believe that truth is really essential. People mistranslate something or misinterpret. And during the Iran 13, frankly, there was one person who harangued us because between us, I told the Iranians that if they let them go, I will not rub their face in it. Because you have to know, Iranians have pride, very strong. And if in the future you ever want to have a situation to be able to address, you got to be true to your word. Now, was something I could publicize? No. But was it key to saving 13 Jewish lives and getting them out, and them today living with their families here in Israel, elsewhere? So you got to sometimes just overlook it and say, you know what, history will judge you. History is judging us, and I think that's why this 50th anniversary is so important. And the benefits, the people you meet, the friendships you make, the respect. I've had such a wide diversity of chair people, and I can honestly say that I've had good working relationships with every one of them, some more, some not, depending on their personalities, but it's my job to adjust to their style and what they can offer. But you look at that group as a whole, it's an amazing group of people. Any community would be proud to have such leadership. And it was true when I started and worked at the JCRC, the people we had there, or at Soviet Jewry. I mean, where were there better people, more dedicated than the whole Soviet Jewry movement, the grassroots movement we built, the hundreds of thousands we brought onto Fifth Avenue. I mean, it was such an exhilarating thing it was really hard work, but it was so exhilarating to the ultimate reward was so great. And now you look back and you say, I helped save Syrian Jews. We made the deal for the Bashowitz mission for Ethiopian Jews. We helped save Russian Jews. We helped save Yemeni Jews. We saved the Iranian Jews. What better reward is there? All the critics, everything, it pales. Where are all those people who were the critics, early years? They're all gone. They disappeared, and we're here. And the answer is that if you do the right thing, ultimately it comes out. People know who gets things done and who doesn't.
Yes.
They know who they can trust and who they can't. It's not because you put out a press release. We put out very few, as you know. It's because of what you do.
Some on the left keep saying, well, Malcolm is too far right, therefore the President's Conference is too far right. What do you answer?
Show us. Where do you see that? First of all, the conference itself, its constituency, has people from the far right, left, far left, and the center. It, by its nature, is a balance, and it's pretty evenly balanced on all those things. We never have a vote, because if you have to go to a vote, you're already dividing people. So our goal is to build a consensus, and that derives from understanding, and I think it's something in your kishka. You know when you have it, you know when you don't. It's pornography, you know it when you see it. So after all the years, we're able to hone a sense of when we know things are beyond. And there, you try to educate, you try to bring people together and debate. And you might convince some to move this way or that way. We bring speakers from every section of the Israeli government. every section of American life. We bring experts who are left, right, center, because I want people not to be jerks with knees when they address issues. I don't want them just to automatically respond because they have some ideological orientation. To force people to think. And it's not always a popular thing. I do it on the radio shows and people say, but why? I said, because I don't want to tell you just a simple answer. You know, tell us how to vote, tell us how to do this. No, I want people to think about it. I want it because that's how they will internalize it. That's how they will remain committed. If you just simply tell them, do this, and we have a wonderful leadership action network, but we give them talking points. We make them think about the action that ultimately we recommend, what we want them to do. 7 million people signed up in 1 year through 400 organizations and individuals, because they know that we're not going to tell them just do something. And when we make a decision, we do consult to understand what does this possibly mean? What could be the downside of these things? That's why you limit the mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And aren't you thrilled now, in contrast, with the way in which so many of your programs have been successful? So many of your efforts have been successful. And one of the things that I feel the conference has done has explained what Israel is, not who Israel is, but what Israel is, as not only a return to our ancient homeland to create a social experiment called the State of Israel. And it's really comprised of human beings. It's people, it's Jews, it's our family. But also, you've helped explain to the world the miracles that come out of Israel, and how Israel is not to be defined by an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Anybody who visits Israel knows the conflict is never in front of you that way. But one of the greatest successes you've had, and it began with the Soviet Jewry movement, and it's continued straight through till now, has been the way in which you personally, and the conference as a whole, has articulated who and what Israel is.
And we learn all the time how to do it better. Mm-hmm. We learn that what are the hang-ups? What are the things that change over time? You can't use the same arguments you used 50 years ago or 40 years ago today. You can't use the same tools to communicate today. That's why this show is so important. That's why getting on the TV, the computer, the internet, all of these things is so important, because that is the way of communication. And you know, the news cycle when I started was 24 hours, then it was 12, 8, 6, 4. Now it's 30 seconds. And if you're not out there and if you don't get the information out, and you can't just react for today, you have to try and anticipate so your reaction holds true tomorrow and the day after. And we have tried innovative ways, and part of the criticism was when we did brash and tough things, but always responsibly. You know, we took over an island in the middle of the East River to protest when Khrushchev came or somebody, and everybody said, "Oh, this is horrific." But I brought the borough presidents and police officials and others, and then Waldheim complained, but it made every front page newspaper in the world, and it was the story. The same thing with many things. These actors, when I said I was going to go to Hollywood, we're going to get people to go, and everybody said, "No, you'll never get them Hollywood finished, anti." We have waiting lists. It's just a matter of money of how many people we can send. And they come back and they talk about it over and over again. They tweet and Twitter, the stars of Dexter, House, Scandal, all these shows went. And they communicate through Facebook to millions and millions of people that we would never reach. So you have to think out of the box sometimes. But again, not to assume you know the answers alone, that you have all the information. And no one organization today can address all the issues. It's not possible. They're too complex. But combining the resources by bringing together, leaving the autonomy and independence of the organizations intact, but finding out what we have in common and building on that, and showing them that the sum is the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts.
So who were your mother and father, and how did you get to be you, and what were the influences that have moved you in a life's direction like this?
My mother and father were my parents.
Named?
They were Ephraim and Esther. My father was arrested by the Nazis in 1934 in Germany, where he lived. He was a teacher and spoke 7, 8 languages, so he ended up in Switzerland teaching in St. Moritz skiing and at Celerina in a Kinderheim, a children's home, where children are already being sent by families from different countries, and because he spoke all these languages, he taught there until he was thrown out of Switzerland in 1937, and then traveled and ended up in Holland, and a torturous journey. And he had gone back for Rosh Hashanah to pray and lead the services in Frankfurt, and my mother was a nurse at the Jewish hospital there, and he had an appendicitis, so they met on the operating table in part, and they were not married there, but my mother, who escaped in 38 through France, she crossed the border illegally, and she did not look Jewish, and she was able to pass as non-Jewish. She did not yet have in her passport, Sarah, and my father did have, and I only found this after their deaths. They never showed us these, but I found their passports and all the papers and things and started piecing it together. You never think of your parents as heroes in this context, and I regret it because I didn't appreciate it enough. But she did not have it yet, so she was able to get out, and then she made the papers, and he came out on the last boat from Holland in June of 1940, the last boat. And they came here and struggled very hard. They tried to bring their parents, and in fact, when I visited Germany, I found out that their visa came the day they were deported. And they were sent to Uzbeka, ultimately
Your grandparents.
concentration camps, all of them, and my aunt and uncle and the 3-year-old cousin.
You lost them all?
They were all killed. So we had my mother's side really no family except some great uncles, and my father's side one sister who also survived. So for me, this is certainly a great influence in my life, that not to get caught in the Holocaust. And my parents never laid it on us. German Jews, by the way, I think more than any of the others, did not talk about the experience. It's part of the nature. But also, they did not lay the burden on us of what happened. And, they had enough guilt, but not that.
You have siblings?
I have a brother, an older brother in Philadelphia still. So they moved to Philadelphia, and they built a Jewish home.
Traditional Jewish home?
Traditional Jewish home.
Shabbat, kashrut?
Yes. And my father got fired very often because he kept Shabbat. And he was a mechanical engineer. And till he found the places that would enable him, he would sometimes get work for the first 4 days and then get fired.
Was he hard or soft?
My father, both.
Both.
Right. He was very smart, intellectually oriented. When you go through what they went through, I can't know how you have to be somewhat tough, but
right.
Very loving, very caring. None of some of the syndromes that other people describe.
Were you close to him?
Yes, close to my parents.
Yes. And that's the home you grew up in.
It was a home I grew up in that appreciated. When I got involved very early, I did political campaigns when I was 10 with Senator Clark. I did many other things. I snuck into Adlai Stevenson's room when he came to campaign for president in Philadelphia. And,
why do you think that was?
What
was driving you? What was driving
you? Because I really believed that if Jews were ever going to had to determine their own fate, and if they were going to do so, they had to be involved in politics. They had to understand.
As a child, you understood
this?
As
a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old. I did it. I didn't just understand it. I got involved. So my parents were very understanding in that regard. It took a toll because, I did my doctorate at Penn and taught international relations at Penn because I wanted to have the best credentials possible. Mm-hmm. I was the Middle East specialist at the Foreign Policy Research Institute while I was at Penn, and I was a teaching assistant to Professor Strauss-Hupé. I had a National Defense Fellowship, which was the best you could get at the time. So all of those things facilitated. And at the same time, I taught Hebrew school, and I would go in the afternoon to study at the yeshiva. So I always led a very busy life.
And you've always led a traditional Jewish life.
I've always had, but I would say that because many of our relatives were not traditional or observant, that I was always raised in a very tolerant atmosphere. Growing up in Philadelphia in a neighborhood that wasn't particularly Orthodox. We moved later to an area that had more concentration of Orthodox Jews. But I taught in Hebrew schools. I taught confirmation classes. I did everything during the years to pay for college and to graduate school.
When was the first time you went to Israel?
The first time I went was in 1966. And I went to Lebanon, to Syria, to Jordan. I was at the Foreign Policy Institute. I was invited by the Arab governments. I did a lot of stuff. I got arrested in Jordan, actually, because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And then, and that was my first trip. My next trip was actually in '67 because they they gave me off 3 months before the Six-Day War to work on the first aid package in Washington with the help of Professor Strauss-Hupé and others at the Institute. They literally gave me carte blanche. I didn't have to go to class. I didn't do anything. I just literally worked on build up to the war. And the day the war ended, I went to Israel and
you were there right after the war?
The day the war ended, I went. And I
What
flew over to
extraordinary
Sinai.
time, right?
We flew over to Sinai. I could still see the tanks and everything, all the positioning. And I got a helmet from an Egyptian helmet and other things, souvenirs that I still have. And I had some remarkable experiences then. This all takes too long. Maybe one day I'll write it up. But when I went the year before, one of my purposes was to try to understand the Palestinian refugee issue, because I believe that that was a key to ever achieving peace in the Middle East, is that you had to find a resolution. And I wrote a 300-page paper about it. And as a result, I was invited to write the Middle East section of the platform of the Republican Party that year, which Nixon introduced, actually, or Lodge introduced, and Nixon endorsed. And I was not a Republican per se, but it was I was very exciting for a 20-year-old to have these kind of experiences. I graduated college pretty young, and I got my master's right away, and then my doctorate in teaching and doing all these things. I never had time for school, but I was always involved. Then I started the Philadelphia Union of Jewish Students. I was on the executive of the World Union of Jewish Students. Invited to be the chairman, but I couldn't because it was too hard. I was the first American ever involved. I was involved with Young Israel. I was vice president of Hillel. I was involved in a wide variety of Jewish endeavors.
And how do you end up in the Soviet Jewry movement?
So I worked for the JCRC in Philadelphia for just under 2 years while I was finishing my
Jewish Community
doctorate.
Relations Council.
Right, and which exposed me to some of the national leadership of NACRAC and others. And the great Isaiah Minkoff sort of tapped me. There was a committee. They asked me to come in to interview. I did, and was selected. And I agreed to come for 2 years to New York. That I would leave Philadelphia for 2 years, which ended up being 6 as we built the Soviet Jewry movement. Mm-hmm. And then when the JCRC was created, they invited me to come and be the first director. So after finally building an organization, I started from zero again, and I was there for 10 years. And then Yehuda Hellman died, and I had been offered the position to be head of the UJA Federation in New York the very day that he passed away. Wow. So they asked me to hold off, and went through. They did a quick search and everything.
Did you have any reservations
of course
about taking this job?
Yes, it was staff of 3. It was salary was less than half of the other one, and it was relatively small infrastructure and the mandate as opposed to this magnificent institution of all the culture and all the things. And people weighed in, from the Prime Minister to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to my colleagues, everybody. I mean, I was getting 100, 150 calls a day. Take this one, take that one, take this one, take that one. And I was really going nuts, I'm telling honestly. And it was my son, who was then, 12 or 13, he said to me finally, "What is the choice?" So I said, "You know what, I'll tell him." And he said to me, "You'll never do anything for money. Where will you make a difference?"
Your son said that?
That's what he said.
What's your son's name?
Hanoch, Robert. He lives in Baltimore. And I said, "That's it."
That's a lovely story.
And that was the end of it.
But when were you married? Where
69.
are you in the story? Where are you when you get married?
I was in Philadelphia. I gave a speech. My future wife's aunt was there. She said, "Boy, do I have a girl for you." Actually, a friend was staying over that weekend, and he mentioned the same thing. So
Same girl?
Same girl.
What's her name?
Frady, and then Schindler. And this was in '67. And I had gone to speak before the war, anticipating the war, and I raised money for different causes in Israel. And
it clicked.
That was it.
That's lovely. And you have how many children?
I have 4 children, all married.
How many grandchildren?
Not enough. We're not up to Chai, but very close.
Mazal tov. Have you ever regretted taking this job?
Yeah, sure. Not often.
But that's honest.
But yes.
Was it ever about money?
No. And I have had tough times, financially, like everybody else. I didn't make much money in most of the years that I worked in Jewish life. And frankly, money was never important to me, and to my own detriment. I didn't do what I should have done, and for my family and for my. But you know what? God takes care of it ultimately, and I don't want for anything. I don't lack for anything. I would like to do more for my kids, but the question of money, I would say no. Or there are times when it hurts when people just, you kill yourself and you say, what this petty stuff, that people get caught up in, and some of the arrows. But when you put it in context, I always tell people who are in trouble, and many of my colleagues have asked me to intercede on their behalf or when they've had problems, and I always do it, even people who are not always so nice. I tell them, you have to rise up above the situation and look down in a dispassionate way. And all of a sudden it puts it into context. That people feel always that the walls are closing and that everybody cares. Nobody cares about those things. They see it. They know the truth ultimately. So you have to look at it, and then you'll make a much more rational decision, a different approach to the immediate challenge, whether external, internal, could be personal, whatever.
So what's the biggest challenge now facing you as the Executive Vice Chairman of the President's Conference?
Continuity here, to see that we build for the future, and as I said, to look for new eagles to soar, and for us to do this to meet the challenges, and to be able to be smart enough, intelligent enough to see the opportunities. It is to keep a community united that too many people want to fracture. That I would say that there are particular issues right now that I see as whether it's Iran or the security of Israel, some of the other things but in a broader sense, I think the first responsibility we have is achdus, is unity in the community. And there's so many divisive forces. There's so many people for personal ego, for some ideological driven concern, and even maybe for legitimate reasons. But we know that the one precondition to every miracle that happened to the Jewish people was achdus, Jewish unity. When we stood at Sinai, Kish Echad B'Lev Echad, to the rescue of Russian Jews and Ethiopian Jews, people, I remember a taxi driver once said, where in Russia are your family from? I said, no, they're from Germany. I said, so why do you care about them? And people have to invent conspiracy theories. Why do they look at the prodigals? They say, why do these Jews care? I once met the Prime Minister of Japan, a former one, and he said to me, we sat down, he said, why are Jews so influential? So I said, because Jews care. And people who care get involved. And when you get involved, you have influence. People don't get involved, don't. And I went on to explain, and I said, it's not just about ourselves. We get involved with others who responded to the tsunami first, and which, you saw El Al planes while they were denying getting aid. And then he said to me, so why did Hitler hate the Jews so much? I said, well, hatred by its nature is irrational. I'll give you the reasons he rationalized it. And I explained all the things, and it was a great segue, because I said, and the first plane I saw landing when I came in was Iran Air. And you have a particular responsibility given the history, et cetera. So, you have great opportunities to influence people, to change things. And people look at a Jewish lobby and Jewish power in pejorative terms. It's not. It's sacred responsibility. You have to treat it right. It's like a muscle. You exercise it right, you build it up. You abuse it, you'll destroy it. But this is something our generation was given. This is the difference from 70 years ago. Abba Ibn said Jews had influence in many places in World War II, but power in none. Jews have power because the world says we have power. The only ones who don't know it are the Jews. That they have to use it, and use it constructively and properly. It's not, I don't want to see Jewish lobby headlines and all of that, because that's not how you should operate. It should be behind the scenes, and sometimes you have to take public stands, and sometimes you want them to know that you are strong and you have a presence and that you're important. But the way we operate and what goals we set and how we achieve those goals. One thing American democracy demands is involvement. Jews have a special responsibility to be involved, because so much depends on American Jews. Jews around the world look to it, to Israel, so many things. And we have the opportunity. We have the chance. We have a chance to reach out to people. Congress men and women are open to us. Senators, administrations, foreign governments. They don't meet with other communities when they come to the UN, because Jews are important. And we have to translate that into results, in responsible and effective ways. It's not, again, sometimes the way people want us to go with sledgehammers. That's not how you do it if you want to have a long-term relationship.
You know, I wish your parents were here, that I could tell them how we all appreciate what they gave us. They gave us you. And you make your parents proud, as you did when they were alive, in some way, in some mysterious way. You make them proud every single day. I am so proud to be your friend. I love you so much, and I am so grateful for what you do. No one is as articulate as you are. Your voice, and I've said this to you many times, should be heard all the time. But kol tuva hatzlacha, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. You just go from strength to strength to strength, 120. You lead, we'll follow. And I thank you for all you've done for the state of Israel, for the Jewish people, for American Jewish life, for the Jewish future, for your grandchildren, and for mine. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. You know that it's mutual.
Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, Tuesday at the Waldorf. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they will pay special tribute. But well, many people are being honored, many people who've done extraordinary things for Jewish life. But there's also a special tribute being paid to Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents, who has been in this position for more than 25 years. And it has been my privilege and my honor to be able to present him so often to you. And he always gives us time, and I'm very, very grateful. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything Malcolm said. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And if you want to be in touch with Malcolm, you can email me, and I will forward your emails on to him. And again, I hope you get a chance to tell him if you ever see him or you want to email him, that you say thank you to. There are certain people who have really made Jewish life possible. One of them is Malcolm Hoenlein. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.